My mother recently called to demand $85,000 to cover the wedding venue bill of my younger sister, entirely unaware that she was begging me to pay off my own husband. It takes a special kind of family dynamic to ban someone from a wedding to avoid awkwardness, only to expect that same person to bankroll the entire reception. Growing up, my younger sister Chloe was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was the live-in assistant and emotional punching bag. I remember my 16th birthday clearly. I had saved up for months to buy a specific silver necklace, but my mother took it from my dresser the next week because Chloe wanted to wear it to a middle school dance. When Chloe lost it, my mother told me that I was being selfish for crying because material things did not matter as much as a sisterly bond. That became the permanent theme of my life. My achievements were always minimized, while the bare minimum efforts of Chloe were celebrated with expensive dinners and gifts. When I graduated from college with honors, my parents took me to a cheap diner and complained about the price of the appetizers. 6 months later, Chloe managed to graduate high school with a barely passing average, and my parents threw a massive backyard party with a catering truck and a live band. When I got my first major corporate promotion in my mid-20s, my mother interrupted my announcement at dinner to ask if I could use my new salary to help pay for the spring break trip of Chloe to Cabo. She literally looked me in the eyes and said that since I did not have much of a social life anyway, I should be happy to help my sister make memories. It was a humiliating realization that my hard work only mattered to them as a resource for Chloe to drain. I was always the disappointing daughter simply because I refused to smile while being pushed into the background. When I got married the first time in my late 20s, my family acted like they were doing me a massive favor just by showing up. The marriage lasted less than 3 years because my ex-husband turned out to be financially reckless and emotionally checked out. When I finally made the painful decision to leave him, my family did not offer comfort or support. Instead, they treated my divorce as a massive personal embarrassment to the family name. My mother told me that I should have just swallowed my pride and stayed with him because nobody likes a bitter, failed woman. That divorce became their permanent excuse to sideline me from every major family milestone. Whenever there was a holiday or a family gathering, I was suddenly the awkward extra person. They stopped inviting me to intimate family dinners because they claimed my presence would make the married couples uncomfortable. 2 years ago, my cousin got married, and my mother called to ask me if I would mind sitting at the distant table near the kitchen. She said she did not want the other guests asking me uncomfortable questions about why I was alone, as if divorce was a contagious disease. I watched my family drift away from me, constructing a narrative where I was a lonely, tragic figure who could not keep a man. They used this fake pity to justify leaving me out of holiday photos and family vacations, always claiming they did not want to make me feel bad about my single status. I eventually stopped fighting it and started building a wall between my life and theirs. I kept my head down, focused on my career, and quietly built a financial safety net that they knew existed but never had access to until now. They truly believed I was sitting alone in the dark, mourning a short marriage that ended 10 years ago, while they planned the event of the century without me. The first inkling I had about the wedding of Chloe was when I opened my social media apps on a Sunday morning 3 weeks ago. I was scrolling through my feed while drinking coffee when a post from my aunt stopped me completely. It was a gallery of 30 high-definition photos showing a lavish, fairy tale wedding that looked like it belonged in a celebrity magazine. The venue was a gorgeous, historic stone manor surrounded by immaculate gardens and twinkling fairy lights. There were easily 200 guests in the background, all dressed in formal attire, laughing and drinking champagne. I saw my mother wearing a custom designer gown, weeping tears of joy as she walked Chloe down the aisle. I saw my cousins, my uncles, and friends I had known since childhood, all celebrating together. Nobody had uttered a single word to me about an engagement, let alone a wedding. I sat on my couch for 2 hours, scrolling through the profiles of different relatives, watching videos of their speeches and their dances. The sheer scale of the deception was breathtaking. 200 people knew about this event, attended it, and successfully kept it a secret from me for months. My own mother and sister had coordinated an entire high-profile wedding, sent out invitations, managed the guest responses, and hosted a massive party without a single slip-up. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I was not just forgotten, I was actively and intentionally erased from the history of my own family. I looked at a photo of my mother, sister, and the new husband of Chloe smiling brightly at the camera, and I felt a profound sense of detachment. They looked so happy to have finally achieved their perfect family dynamic, one where the disappointing, divorced older daughter simply did not exist. My hands were shaking when I finally dialed the number of my mother later that afternoon. When she answered, her voice was light and cheerful, completely devoid of any guilt. I asked her directly why I was looking at photos of the wedding of my sister online when I did not even know she was engaged. There was a long, heavy pause on the line before my mother sighed loudly, sounding more annoyed than remorseful. She told me that they had discussed it as a family and decided it was for the best. She said that Chloe wanted her wedding day to be entirely about romance, joy, and new beginnings. Then she said the words that permanently broke something inside me. She told me that my presence would have just reminded everyone of failure, and they did not want my bitter energy ruining the special day of Chloe. She said I was not really needed there anyway since I do not have a family of my own to bring, so my absence would not disrupt the seating charts. I asked her if she realized how cruel that was, and she scoffed, telling me to stop making everything about myself. She said that as an older, divorced woman, I should understand that young brides are sensitive and deserve to have their dream day without any awkward reminders of how marriages can fail. She told me to grow up, be happy for my sister from a distance, and stop causing unnecessary drama. When I hung up the phone, I did not cry. The sheer cruelty of her words burned away any remaining guilt or obligation I had toward them. I realized they did not view me as a human being with feelings, but rather as an inconvenient footnote in the perfect story of Chloe. I promised myself right then that I would never reach out to them again, and I looked forward to a peaceful life away from their venom. What my family did not know was that my life was far from the lonely, tragic story they had invented for me. 2 years ago, I met a man named Mark through a mutual business acquaintance. Mark was everything my family was not: kind, protective, deeply grounded, and incredibly successful. He looked at me and saw a strong, resilient woman, not a broken divorcee. We fell deeply in love, and when he proposed, we decided to get married in a private, beautiful ceremony on a cliffside in Maui with just a few close friends. I chose not to invite my family because I knew they would find a way to criticize the venue, ruin the mood, or make me feel small on my own wedding day. For 2 years, Mark and I built a beautiful, peaceful life together in our home on the outskirts of the city. He cherished me in a way I had never experienced before, and for the first time in my life, I knew what a real family felt like. Mark was also an incredibly successful entrepreneur who owned a massive luxury hospitality and event management corporation. One of his flagship properties was a historic stone manor that hosted some of the most exclusive weddings in the state. I never talked about my family to the business associates of Mark, and I kept my personal life completely separate from his corporate empire to protect our peace. My family never bothered to ask about my life, so they never found out that the daughter they pitted and ignored was actually living a life of true abundance and love. I let them believe whatever lie made them feel superior, while I quietly enjoyed a marriage that was built on a solid foundation of mutual respect and genuine devotion. 3 weeks after that devastating phone call, my phone rang on a Tuesday evening, and the name of my mother flashed on the screen. I almost did not answer, but curiosity got the better of me. When I picked up, her voice was completely different from the cold, dismissive tone she had used during our last conversation. She was practically breathless, crying softly, and sounding entirely frantic. She started by telling me how much she missed me and how terrible she felt about how things had been handled with the wedding. Before I could even process the sudden change, she launched into the real reason for her call. She explained that Chloe and her new husband had gotten carried away during the wedding planning process. They wanted to impress his wealthy friends, so they kept adding luxury upgrades to the package, including top-shelf open bars, premium catering, and midnight fireworks. My mother explained that the young couple had promised they had the funds to cover it, but their financing had fallen through at the last minute. Now, the event company was threatening to sue them and send the debt to collections if the remaining balance was not paid by the end of the week. My mother took a deep breath and finally dropped the bomb. She asked me if I could transfer $85,000 to her account immediately to clear the debt. She said it was an absolute family emergency and that the entire future of Chloe would be ruined before it even started if they got sued. I sat in absolute silence, listening to her voice shake over the phone, amazed by the sheer audacity of a woman who had banned me from the building now begging me to pay for the walls. When I did not immediately answer, the tone of my mother shifted from desperate weeping to a sharp, familiar entitlement. She said that she knew $85,000 was a lot of money, but she also knew my corporate salary and my savings could easily handle it. Then she used the exact phrase that sealed her own fate. She told me that since I never had a real family of my own to spend my money on, and because I was likely going going to be single forever. I did not have the same financial burdens as people with children and husbands. She said it was my duty as the big sister to step up and save Chloe from financial ruin. She claimed that my money was just sitting in the bank doing nothing, while Chloe needed it to start her new life on the right foot. I forced myself to remain completely calm, keeping my voice steady as I began to ask her specific, probing questions. I asked her what the name of the venue was and who exactly was threatening to sue them. She eagerly gave me the details, thinking I was preparing to write a check. She told me the wedding was held at the Grandview Manor estate, and the billing department of the parent company, Vanguard Hospitality, was refusing to negotiate any further. She complained bitterly about how cold and heartless the corporate staff had been to Chloe, calling them vultures for demanding their money for services already rendered. I leaned back against my kitchen counter, looking over at Mark, who was reading a book on the couch, and a cold wave of realization washed over me as I recognized the exact name of his company. I asked my mother, "Do you truly believe that I am just a lonely, bitter woman with a bank account waiting to be drained by people who hate me?" She sounded confused and told me that my feelings were irrelevant right now because this was a financial crisis that affected the family reputation. That was the exact moment I decided to drop the first bomb. I told her very clearly that I was not single, I was not lonely, and I had not been alone for a very long time. I informed her that I had been happily married for 2 full years to an incredible man who cherished me. I told her that we had a beautiful wedding of our own, a real home, and a life filled with love that she could not even begin to comprehend. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. My mother gasped so loudly I could hear it through the speaker. She demanded to know why I had kept such a massive secret from her, accusing me of being deceitful and cruel for hiding my life from my own mother. I reminded her of her own words, telling her that since my presence at family events apparently reminded everyone of failure, I did not want to burden her with my happiness. I told her that she had spent the last 10 years treating me like a broken, disposable outsider, so she had completely forfeited the right to know anything about my joy. She tried to stammer an excuse, claiming they would have loved to meet him, but I cut her off before she could spin another lie to cover her tracks. Before she could recover from the shock of my marriage, I told her that we needed to discuss the $85,000 she owed to Vanguard Hospitality for the wedding of Chloe. My mother immediately tried to pivot back to the money, begging me to put my personal feelings aside and remember that family comes first. She said that if my new husband was wealthy, then we should easily be able to help Chloe out of this massive trap. I took a deep breath, smiled to myself, and dropped the second, fatal bomb. I told her that I knew the exact corporate billing department she was dealing with because Vanguard Hospitality belongs to my husband. I explained to her that the historic stone manor Chloe used to impress her friends was literally owned by the man they excluded me to avoid. I told her that the heartless corporate staff she was complaining about were actually the direct employees of my husband, and they were acting under strict company guidelines regarding unpaid balances. I could hear the breath of my mother catch in her throat, followed by a faint, muffled sound as if she had dropped her phone on the table. The sheer, devastating irony of the situation hit her all at once. She had intentionally banned me from the most lavish venue in the area to keep my failed energy away from her golden child, only to realize that my secret life was the sole reason that venue existed to host them in the first place. The silence stretched on for nearly 30 seconds as her brain scrambled to process the fact that she was begging the daughter she despised for mercy from the son-in-law she had refused to invite. When my mother finally found her voice, the entitlement was completely gone, replaced by absolute panic and frantic desperation. She began to babble, apologizing profusely for the exclusion and claiming it was all a massive misunderstanding coordinated by the wedding planner of Chloe. She begged me to talk to my husband, to ask him to waive the fee, erase the debt, or at least give them a massive family discount. She said that Chloe and her husband were crying in the next room, terrified of going to court and losing their jobs. I listened to her plead for a few minutes, feeling a profound sense of closure. I told her that my husband is a professional businessman who keeps his corporate operations completely separate from our personal life, and I would never disrespect his work by asking him to take an $85,000 loss for people who do not even respect his wife. I told her that Chloe got the exact wedding she wanted, a day entirely about her, without my bitter presence, so now she gets to enjoy the exact financial consequences that come with it. I informed her that Vanguard Hospitality would proceed with legal action if the balance was not paid in full by Friday morning. I told her to never call my number again, And then I hung up the phone and blocked her along with my sister and every extended relative who had smiled in those photos. Mark and I went out for a beautiful dinner that night to celebrate our peace. My family wanted to exclude me from the wedding to ensure their dream day went perfectly, but they forgot that when you lock the door on the person who owns the house, you eventually have to pay for the key. If you enjoyed this story, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel for more.